I'm no fisherman, that's for sure. And he's a
I'm not either.
out on his lake, and I'd get snagged up, and he'd untangle me. I could tell he was a little impatient, but he was recruiting me at the time. Finally, he said, "All right, here's the deal. Here's the deal." And
Today on the sideline, I'm talking with former Memphis Showboats president and general manager and longtime AutoZone Liberty Bowl executive director, Steve Ehrhart, is up next. Welcome back to the Fifth Quarter Podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Adams, and this is where we dive deep into the world of sports, talking with retired athletes, current athletes, and the people who make the sports world great. A quick reminder, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Audible, YouTube, and more. And if you love what you hear, take a screenshot, share it on Instagram stories, and tag us at 5THQRT Podcast so others can discover these stories as well. Now, grab your iced tea or your coffee. Get ready to be motivated and inspired because this is where the real stories are told. Today's episode is a special on the sideline conversation with a man whose impact on Memphis sports has spanned decades, Steve Ehrhart. From his early days as a student athlete in Colorado to practicing sports law and representing athletes and coaches to becoming one of the early leaders of the United States Football League, Steve built a career rooted in sports, leadership, and vision. In my recent episode 83, I spoke with author Keith B. Wood about his latest book, The Memphis Showboats. Today, we hear from someone who lived that story from the inside. Yes, Steve Ehrhart. Steve served as president and general manager of the Memphis Showboats during the 1984-85 seasons after being recruited to Memphis by cotton industry titan Billy Dunavant. He helped build the franchise roster, including stars like Reggie White, and played a major role in one of the most memorable chapters in Memphis sports history. Steve would later continue shaping the city's sports landscape through decades of leadership as the executive director of the AutoZone Liberty Bowl, which he still holds today, one of the South's premier annual sporting events. Today, Steve takes us inside the rise of the Showboats, why Memphis embraced the team, and how Billy Dunavant got him to say yes, and what kept him invested in the city long after that chapter ended. Steve, welcome to the Fifth Quarter.
great to be here with you. You know the Memphis sports scene better than anybody, so glad to be here with you on your broadcast.
As we were chatting beforehand, Keith Wood, Dr. Keith Wood from Christian Brothers High School, he's been on the show a couple of times. He was here last month promoting his brand new book about the Memphis Showboats, the USFL team in the city's fight for major league status. You were a big part of helping him edit that book, and you wrote the foreword.
That's right. When Keith came to me, and I knew a little bit about him over there at Christian Brothers and his earlier books about the Memphis community, a well-respected guy, and
Yes.
he coached in the Memphis area, so he certainly is a guy that understands sports and so on. And so, yes, when he talked to me about doing a book about the Showboats, he wanted to tie it into Memphis's quest for football, and I've been
Right.
involved with that myself for over 40 years, unbelievably. And so we talked a lot about when we're here with the Showboats, the great success we had with the Showboats, and then following up with the XFL, and then with the Canadian Football League. And then I was not involved in the latest iteration when they tried to bring the USFL back. But the
Right.
Showboats are really a wonderful part of my life, and I just was so proud to be able to participate with Keith and give him some materials. And of course, he came by the office and did a lot of shots of pictures. I've got Reggie White's jersey up here, and we've got the picture of the 1985 Showboats when we had such a great team that year. So glad to be here with you. And every day somebody talks about the great Showboat history. So I'm glad to be here with you, Sandy, talk about that. In fact, since you follow the University of Memphis sporting scene, and had lunch with Charles Huff, the new football coach.
Yes. Yes.
Question he asked when I said, "Tell me about the Showboats and about Reggie White." And he had, when he was a kid, he followed the USFL. So every day somebody talks about the great success of the Memphis Showboats back in 84, 5, 6, in that area.
It's I moved to Memphis as we were talking about in 1986, so I got here on the very end, but I heard about, the Showboats, Pepper Rogers and all of that. So And the one thing, and Keith and I have kind of bonded over that. The one thing that I've seen is history has been a part of my educational background, and I love sports too. But I love how sports is just so intertwined into the fabric of the city, and it has such a way of bringing people together like nothing else, which you have to be here in order to understand that.
Well, that's a great point, Sam. And I think it's to some degree part of the American culture. And I
Yes.
always use a guy that took me under wing. Some of your followers will not remember Danny Thomas, the
Mm,
founder of
yes.
the Children's Research Hospital, one of Memphis's great institutions. He took me under wing a little bit. He was a great football guy. A lot of people don't realize that
I
Danny
didn't know
Thomas,
that.
he owned a minority interest in the Miami Dolphins football team, and a
Oh,
lot of people
wow.
didn't realize that. I've got some great old video, black and white. He and Sammy Davis Jr., his buddy, running up and down the
Yeah.
sidelines there with the Dolphins games back. I guess it was the late '70s, early '80s, and so. He told me that there's two ways to reach the American public. It's through entertainment and through sports. And he
Sure.
built his career as well as St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And look at all the sporting events they're tied into now and all the entertainers that way. Because people can talk about it. And hopefully there's not a great deal of division. There's rivalries between cities and teams, but everybody can get around the water cooler and talk about the Memphis
Yeah.
basketball team or the Memphis Showboats and what happened Sunday. And so I believe exactly what you said, Sandy. It's such a great part of the culture,
Mm,
especially of this city.
yes.
Memphis is yearning and trying and working hard to become a major league city. So yeah, we're proud to be part of that.
And I think from people looking on the outside, they see the music scene and they think that that's all that's made up of the city, and it's really not. There's just so much more. Um, you grew up in Colorado. You went to college there. You got your law degree there, if I did my research correct.
Absolutely right.
Okay. And then you went to New York to run the USFL headquarters.
That's right. When we started the league and that's part of the quest that Keith Wood is on in 1982. Salaries were way down in the
Mm,
NFL. The NFL was really emerging. I mean,
right.
we're taking baseball as America's pastime, and so there wasn't much room for all the great players coming out of college and all the coaches. There were plenty of great coaches, plenty of great players, and great cities who were yearning to have a major league team.
Yeah.
So we started the USFL in 1982, and a lot of the cities were cities that did not have NFL teams. Although the television people said you've got to have teams in the big metro areas, New
Right.
York, Chicago, Los Angeles. But there were team there was we worked at in that first year we had team Birmingham and Tampa and we had I should have done my work there for years ago. But then we expanded and to the following year, and that's when Memphis came in to the league a year later. We played 1 year of the USFL. We had a great success, had higher TV ratings than Major League
Right.
Baseball. And so the next year, there were six expansion teams that we added to the original 12. There was the Memphis Showboats, there was the Jacksonville Bulls, Jacksonville
Right.
team then. There was the team that was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, called the Oklahoma Wranglers there,
Mm,
and uh, and then let's see, Orlando and Houston came in, the Houston Gamblers with
mm,
Jim
yeah.
Kelly, and San Antonio and Memphis. So and that's when Memphis came into the league and for the '84 spring of the '84 season.
Mm,
And then we played in the '84 season here, and then in the '85 season, and then in the '86 season. That's the ultimate, well, the season that went down with the
right.
lawsuits with uh, then Donald Trump, owner of the New Jersey Generals, convinced everybody to go the legal route instead of playing that last 1986 season. But it was a great situation in Memphis. Remember, there was no Tunica, no gaming there. There was no cell phones, nothing.
Right.
So people love the Memphis Showboats. And when Billy Dunavant, who was our principal owner at the time, he said, put this team together to be competitive with an NFL team, which we did. We had five number one draft choices that we had stolen away from the NFL, and that was in addition to some other great players. And so it really was a great time in Memphis in that 84, 85,
Right.
86 season.
I'm curious as to how Billy Dunavant convinced you to leave New York and move down to Memphis.
Well, we first, and actually, some of the people may remember John Bassett, who was a good friend of Billy Dunavant's when John Bassett owned the team 10 years earlier in Memphis. And it takes real old timers now to remember
Right.
the original Memphis Grizzlies who played in the very first World Football League. And people may remember it was Larry Zonka, Jim Kick, Paul Warfield. Those were the stars of that team that played in the Liberty Bowl in, I think it was 74 and 75. So John Bassett, the first year of the USFL, owned the Tampa Bay Bandits. He and Burt Reynolds, they had some star power in that. And so John Bassett and I had worked together, putting the league together with her in the early days. So he had told Billy Dunavant that, well, Ehrhart knows what he's doing, I guess, and stuff like that. So Billy came and recruited him, and he offered me the job of the general manager, president of the team, a little bit of ownership in the team. And I had told him that I'd given my word I would stay 2 years in New York in the league office to, get the league going because we
Right.
scratch. But Billy, yeah, I had to turn him down. But he get into, I guess, my career, and I hopefully I'm still involved with Billy's family. But so waited 6 months till I'd finished my
Right.
to the league. And so then he brought me down to Memphis. He's got a fishing place down in Mississippi. And so he took me out. I'm no fisherman, that's for sure. And he's
I'm not either.
out on his lake, and I'd get snagged up, and he'd untangle me. I could tell he was a little impatient, but he was recruiting me at the time. Finally, he said, "All right, here's the deal. Here's the deal, and we're not going back to shore until you say yes. You're coming to Memphis." So it was in the boat. Reminded me a little bit of The Godfather, where I'm not letting you out of the boat until you say yes and commit to come down here. And so, and we we shook hands in that boat and went back to shore, and then we moved down here. And my family's been here, and my son and grandkids are here going to
Yeah.
U.S. same schools there. So, yes, that was the background of Billy making me the Godfather offer. That's one you cannot say no to.
Now, had you been to Memphis a lot before that trip?
No, I had my initial I guess contact with Memphis was I was a dumb and young assistant coach at the University of Colorado, and
Mm.
we played Alabama in the 1969 Liberty Bowl, the football game.
I
And
was 1 year old.
yeah, well, that's now you know how old I am. But so that was just my first peripheral contact to Memphis. But no, then my first trip, we worked with the original fellow that in some of your list or your podcasts. Do I call them listeners or viewers of
Sure.
the
They're
podcast?
viewers and listeners.
Your
They do.
followers, your followers.
Yes, you're followers.
Originally, when I was in New York, in fact, on the wall, I still have when I was still an officer, executive director of the USFL New York, Logan Young, many of the old timers will remember Logan was the original guy who bought the franchise here during the expansion. But then Logan ended up, whatever the reasons were, then Billy stepped in and Billy became the principal owner of the team back then. But so I had not really knew much about Memphis. And again, Memphis at that time, the Zonka kick and Warfield from 10 years earlier, that had gotten a lot of national attention but unfortunately that league didn't survive either, the original World Football League, but it made quite an impact on the NFL because in fact those players that came, remember they were Miami Dolphins, Larry
Yeah.
Paul Warfield and Kick. I think they won the Super Bowl maybe back with the Dolphins. And so when they
Right.
played here with the Memphis Grizzlies, and people always ask again for your followers, that was the original Memphis Grizzlies team.
Mm.
When the basketball team now is named the Memphis Grizzlies. Of course, they had the name because they moved from Vancouver, so there was no natural connection between the original
Right.
football and the Vancouver Grizzlies who moved to Memphis, and they kept the Grizzlies name for the basketball team.
So when you came down here and you started to work as the GM and president, what was your first order of business? Like, what did you see as the most important thing for you to start with? All right, before we get into the next topic, I want to take a quick moment to tell you about something that can really help you level up your personal brand. I've created an exclusive new book called The Visionary Personal Brand Playbook. It's perfect for those of you who have big goals but aren't exactly sure how to make your brand stand out, or for that matter, where to even start. It's packed with actionable tips that you can start using right now, today. If you're interested, head over to my website at sandy-adams.com/playbook and grab your copy. Now back to the show.
Well, it was very clear. Billy Dunavant, who was at the time the world's largest cotton merchant and a
Mm,
great business guy, had a photographic memory, and he was a great athlete too. People didn't realize he played tennis. I think he had a basketball scholarship to go to Vanderbilt, but
oh,
he finished his education at the University of Memphis. But he was an unbelievable competitor. He played competitive tennis. He played tennis against Bobby Riggs. Is that a name? You might
yeah,
Bobby Riggs. He and Billy would play these great matches for big money, incidentally. And so uh, Billy said, build a team that can win in the NFL because that's our eventual goal is to become the best of the best. So
right.
that was the order of business. And we went after that in a hurry. As I say, I think by the time the year following, we had five NFL first round draft choices, legitimate
Mm,
first round draft choices on the team. And then I'm looking up on my wall right now on the 85 Showboats team. There were 17 of those players were still playing in the NFL 5 years later in 1990.
yes,
And of course, Reggie White, maybe the best defensive lineman that's ever lived, ever played in either league, was on that team. And so we built a team. Now, we probably weren't quite ready to beat an NFL team, but our frontline players were plenty good enough. As I say, when Reggie White left our team to go to the Eagles. I remember telling the owner of the Eagles who had come down to Memphis when they were tampering with his contract, to be
yeah,
blunt. Uh, I told Mr. Well, I use his name here, but I said, he's not only better than anybody you got on the Philadelphia Eagles, he may be better than anybody in your own
right,
league.
right.
That's how good Reggie White was. I mean, he's been inducted in every Hall of Fame, including the Memphis Hall of Fame, as well as the National Football Foundation. So that was the order of business, was to build a team that could win. And by that first year that I was here, we did get to the second round of the playoffs, but we ended up getting beat by I guess it was the Stars that had such a good team that year. They beat
Sure.
the Generals in the playoff. But yeah, but that brought enthusiasm to Memphis and respect. And again, the pictures of the sold out Liberty Bowl Stadium with the Showboats, springtime and nice weather, and we had a great run there and great enthusiasm, and still people all every day come back and say, "Man, I sure enjoyed the Showboats. What a great team."
So let's talk about Reggie White for a second. So when did you, because my football history is not that great, but when did you first take notice of him and then realize he was going to be such a big part of what you wanted to build?
I guess I know he was here. No, he had a great career at the University of Tennessee, so I'm not knocking that down. But the day I really realized how unbelievable he was we were at Rhodes College. I think maybe at that time it was still Southwestern, but Rhodes College is where we had our training camp.
Right,
So this was before practice one day. Some of the guys were out there playing 2-on-2 touch football. And so I saw Reggie, who was over 300 pounds, 6'5",
my
and he's
God.
covering these little defensive and offensive receivers and defensive backs. I mean, and Derek Crawford, another guy who is a good player, played with the San Francisco 49ers, and Gizmo Williams, a little short guy who later went to the Canadian Football League and holds their all-time record for punt return. So you can imagine his Gizmo's name. He could cut and twist and turn and
I
punt
love the
all over.
name.
Well, that was his name because he was exactly that way. And so Reggie is out there playing a defensive back, covering this little punt return guy that was probably weighed 175, as quick as a whistle, and he's turning his hips and stretching out and running. And so I said, this is unbelievable. I've never seen a guy that big, that strong, that colorful, in the sense that he was laughing and having a good time.
Right.
I say that because attitude is a heck of a
It is.
part of your day. And so I knew he at that time. I said, "This is unbelievable." And of course, that's when I told the Eagles, and they brought him in. He didn't even go to training camp the year he went there, and his first game, I think he got 2 sacks, and then he led the league for years in sacks
Wow.
because he had that ability to strength and speed and being able to turn his body, agility for a big man. So that was the day that I said, "Man, this is something special."
Okay, so we know about Reggie White. We know about the other ones. Who is one Showboats player that history is kind of forgotten but deserves more credit, in your opinion?
That's a really good. I would say maybe if I can say there were
You
three
can say there were
three
more.
or, three or four, because so many of them went on to great. Larry Rubens was our center. He went on, was the starting center for the Chicago Bears when they won the Super Bowl. A name that a lot of people don't really remember. Timmy Spencer was one of our running backs who played for the San Diego Chargers for years as starting running back. We had two quarterbacks that have been featured a lot in the
Right,
book. He does a lot about the two quarterbacks that were competing with each other for playing time during the year. Mike Kelly, who came from Georgia Tech, who is more a
right,
classic passing quarterback, and Walter Lewis, who is the option quarterback from the University of Alabama. With Walter, the year before he signed with the Showboats, he was the starting quarterback for Alabama with Bear Bryant's last year
wow,
when they beat Illinois in the famous Liberty Bowl game, of
right,
which Bear, then that was his last college game.
right.
Announced that that would be his last game here in the Liberty Bowl against Illinois. And then unfortunately, he passed away like 3 weeks later after the bowl game. But Walter was the star quarterback there. So in the book, Keith talks a lot about how, Walter was, the option quarterback, fast, good runner, wasn't probably quite as good as a pocket passer as Mike
Right.
Kelly was. And then as we worked through that 1985 season, there was a competition. Walter was one of the leading early black quarterbacks. Remember, in the NFL at that time,
Mm,
I don't know that there was even a single
right.
quarterback. I'd have to go back and check. Maybe the Denver Broncos had quarterback there in the 70s, but that's one reason why Doug Williams. We know we're getting on a little track. Doug Williams signed in our league and played with in the USFL before he went to Tampa, and then won I think, didn't he win a Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFL when he went back to the NFL? So that's an important part of the book, talking about the relationship, and two different quarterbacks who fight, and both played well for us during that year. In fact, Walter Lewis called me last week. He's now in Birmingham, he's a successful business guy. Mike Kelly's, I think, over in Jackson, Tennessee, and
Oh,
very
that's close to
successful.
where I grew up.
Yeah, very successful business guy. So those are two guys that really. But I'm really proud. I keep looking up at the wall here, looking at some of the names on the wall here. But we had some characters, but Reggie was absolutely the team leader, and he had that great mental approach to the game too. Why would he won here? He won when he went to let's see, he went to Green Bay.
Mhm.
Then he went to Charlotte, and
Right.
made people around him better. And he had a great sense of humor too. A lot of people don't realize, maybe this breaking it on your Sandy, the people that knew him well, that he could imitate any kind of dog bark. I mean, he could bark like a big tough German Shepherd, or he can bark like a little little tiny dog. So he'd hide behind the corner, and when one of his teammates would come around the corner, he'd give him a big bark,
Okay, that's funny.
fall down on the floor. But he had that sense of being able to be the leader on the field, leader mentally, but
Right.
also he was so well respected because he wasn't tough on teammates, but he got great performance out of them because he was such a blessed player, not only his approach to the game, but physical and mental as well.
So let's talk about the coach, Pepper Rogers. What was he like behind closed doors?
Well, Pepper was unique. Let's put it that way. Let's say unique and very smart, very clever kind of guy. You know, he had a great history. Probably your followers would know
Mm,
that he was a great athlete at Georgia Tech. I mean, he played in the Orange Bowl. He set some records. He was also, I think, kicker for Georgia Tech.
right.
And then he went on. He coached everywhere he coached in college. He was successful. I think he had some time at the Air Force Academy. He then
Wow.
he was head coach at Kansas, and I think he had John Riggins, great running back there at Kansas. Kansas was the head coach at UCLA. I hope I'm remembering this right. I didn't. I'm remembering everybody about that. And then he was also, I believe, he went back to Georgia Tech, his alma mater, and coached there.
Right.
And so, but he was a wild man too. I mean, he enjoyed life. I'd say it that way, and I say that in a very positive way. And he made people laugh. He made them approach the game in a way. Hey, let's not get so damn tight about the game that we can't play well. And
Right.
so he kept it in a way so that the players, would enjoy practice, would get serious when it was time to get serious. And the name of our offense was called Pepper Ball because it was unpredictable and he have a lot of fun with the play. He actually wrote a book or two himself, about I think Fourth and Long Gone was the name of the title
Right.
of one of his books. But he was a very accomplished and very intellectual guy in a lot of ways. He would always make people around him have a good time. And so Pepper Ball, it was a unique brand of ball, and so and we all miss him today. But and a very successful coach too. I mean, people sometimes say, "Well, who are the great coaches?" But from his career as a player to college to
Right.
coaching in the USFL. So he did a lot of work back in Washington D.C. and he was close friends with Fred Smith, the founder and CEO of of FedEx, and Fred and he were great friends, and unfortunately they're both gone now.
Right. It was interesting. I shared this on the episode with Keith, but one of my friends who's a couple of years older than me, when he was at Memphis State living in the dorm, Pepper came into one of the lounges on one of the floors on the guys' side to promote the football games, trying to
Oh,
get
really?
people, yeah, trying to get people to come out. With the NFL draft that just happened, is there any great story around Pepper being involved with the draft picks or with trades or anything like that?
I'm not sure around the draft because in those days, remember, the draft was a whole different deal.
Yeah,
The USFL in our first draft, which was been in the maybe January of 1983. I'm thinking of it
right,
because we got the league started in the summer and fall of 82. We're putting everything together, and we rented a hotel there and tried to make a big but and we drafted some pretty good darn players that year. In fact, of course, Herschel, he was drafted by the New Jersey Generals. Now, Donald Trump did not own the team that first year. Walter Duncan was the owner of the Generals. Donald didn't buy it until a year later. But so in the hotel we were at, we tried to make it a little bit show because Chet Simmons, who was then the commissioner of the league, had been president of ESPN. So we got it on ESPN now. And the NFL didn't draft until later, I think in April that year, much
right.
like they do now. And so we got out ahead of them. But the NFL was very stodgy. It was no show like it is now. It's
Yeah,
grown. It's unbelievable now. But there wasn't a lot of there most of the time it was on the phone calls and sending people in, and maybe some teams had some representatives there, but we pioneered making it into a media type event, and it's unbelievable what it is today.
it
But
is very much so.
but as far as Pepper, when we had our expansion draft, we were just really trying to dig out in what would have been before the 85 season. You know, John Corker, for example, we picked him up from the Michigan team from the year
Right.
before, and we had several other players that we had picked up from other teams. So it was pretty businesslike there, but he was able to help where Pepper's magic was like, for example, I'll use two players' names, Leonard Coleman and Mossy Cade. And these guys had both number one draft picks in the NFL. I'm number one picks. I believe Leonard was a number one pick uh, of the Colts. I believe that. I may be wrong on that. And then Mossy, I thought, was the Chargers. So for
Right.
us as an upstart league to go compete against the power of the NFL, and Pepper was great in engaging with the players and say, "You come down here and you have a great time," and they get them laughing and enjoying coming down here to play in Memphis. So I think it was once the draft was over, he was able to, really be a important part because the NFL didn't want to lose those players to little old Memphis Showboats, out of
Right.
taking the players away from the big NFL teams with all their money and power and juice and tradition. And so that's where he was really, really good at interacting and working to bring it. And it was an overall, the Billy Dunavant had a great name and a great recognition, and we were building an NFL style program here. In fact,
Right.
I think we had probably remember, the NFL was not what it is today. I mean, it's a
No.
behemoth now, but in those days, I mean, they and we signed Tyrone McGriff, who was a lineman who had been a starting guard for the Pittsburgh Steelers Super Bowl team the year before, and we were able to convince Tyrone to come down here and play. So that's where we were recruiting. The NFL was a little bit, hey, here's the money, honey, not too much of hey, we want you to be here and we're going to watch out, take care of you. You're going to have fun down here playing. Plus, we were competitive in a lot of ways with the money
Right.
with the NFL at the time. Nowadays, you can't touch the money in the NFL. I mean, it's just growing unbelievably.
Do you think the money was the biggest factor that pulled those players in down to Memphis to play in the Showboats?
No, I think it was a combination of, like, for example, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the time had
Right.
a tough reputation. In fact, remember Bo Jackson, another guy who had some hit story there. I remember talking with Bo about coming to sign with the Kansas City Royals and play baseball. And actually, he started here with Memphis in their Double A team in Memphis, the Memphis Chicks. That's another story for you, another
I
Buck.
didn't know that. I might have to have you back on here. Okay.
He signed there just because he didn't want to go to Tampa. And remember, and even later, John Elway didn't want to go play for Baltimore, and so it wasn't all about the money because the NFL, they could beat the money, and I think it was more the upstart league, and Joe Namath had started with the old American Football League and made a great career at
Right.
taking the path less traveled. That's sort of what our players did, like a Reggie White did, or some of these other number one picks. Tim Spencer had been a number one pick. Gary Zimmerman, Gary's in the Hall of Fame now, but he wanted to come over and play here with us for a year, and so it was a good feeling about the team, and that's one thing that I think flows over today. Just your interest today, or the book that
Mhm.
Keith has about the. It was a time that people connected with. There nowadays, there's a lot of negativism around about some
Yes.
things, but we had a lot of great support. I mean, of course, there was no social media at that time, and everything, but people really did love the showboats. We had the dream boats, the young ladies. I mean, they were
Mhm.
terrific. I mean, and there were, I think there were over 1,000 young ladies trying out for the Memphis Dreamboats, and they were a great dance team. Of course, the Cowboys cheerleader were setting the pace, but a lot of those NFL
Right.
teams they didn't go into that. But we had as good a support group. We had the boats ball, and that was in addition to pepper ball, it's boats ball, and the fans really connected with the team.
So if if everybody's dream had stayed the same and not wanted, because my understanding is the certain people wanted the league to start playing in the fall, and so they went up against the NFL and the lawsuit happened. If if the league had really stayed in playing during the spring and not competing with the NFL, do you see that it might have lasted much longer?
Absolutely. In fact, there were a lot of good experts, economic experts that said, hey, you
Mm,
need to stay in the spring. You can
right.
get enough TV money to be able to continue to play and be vital. Whereas when we went into the fall, then we had to would have had. We never
Right.
did play a game in the fall. Would have had to fight not only the NFL but college football as well. So the big difference that I see, in fact, I was talking to some folks the other day. What the current spring leagues miss now, they don't have the star, the great players.
Right.
To play in the springtime, you had to get recognizable players. The fans are smart. They're going to figure it out. And so in our league, we had players like Reggie White, but we also, the league had signed three straight Heisman Trophy winners. Herschel Walker, the first,
Which is crazy.
Mike
Yes.
Rozier from Nebraska, the second year, Doug Flutie from Boston College, the third year. And we signed Jim Kelly, a Hall of Fame quarterback. We
Right.
signed Steve Young, Hall of Fame quarterback, Walter Lewis, who we talked about earlier. So we had the star players that we kept them in the spring, we would have been going on. Then I think the economic pressures would have eventually, there would have been some type of merger, just like what happened with the American Football League with
Right.
the NFL back, 40 years or 20 years before us.
Right.
And so, but we would have continue to be successful, and certain teams were been in a tough spot. That's one reason why the Michigan Panthers, who were a very successful team, they didn't want to go up against the Detroit Lions in the fall, so they moved and relocated to Oakland because the Oakland Raiders had left to go to Los
Right.
Angeles then, and so the Oakland Invaders was the name of that team. Were a very good team there. The Philadelphia team moved out of Philadelphia into Baltimore because the Colts had left to go to Indianapolis. So, yeah, that's a great question, Sandy. That say that yes, I think we would have had a great 1986 year because we had shrunk down and we had 8 teams. For example, Herschel was still up in New York, but they also
Yeah.
had Jim Kelly was going to go up there and be his quarterback that year, and they would have just been terrific. And we were lining up some really better players, backup play. We didn't have some really good frontline players, but to make the Showboats really a team that would be able to play in the NFL. So I think we'd have probably played another couple of years, and then the economic forces would have driven a deal because we were close to a deal.
Right.
It's been one of the unwritten scenarios. There was a lot of talks about making a deal with the NFL even before the trial, the famous
Right.
trial that ended up. I hate to even think about it. It makes me upset even thinking about that. But and Memphis would have been one of the teams, and then I think that's what I keep showing this, but in Keith's book, that would have, um, you know, Memphis would have been if I had to predict, we'd have played a couple more years. Then I think Baltimore would have come in because Baltimore had had
Right.
the Colts before.
Sure.
We would have made it. Arizona would have made it because the Cardinals were still in St. Louis. So Arizona would have come in and Oakland. So those 4 teams, and that's what caused, and of course, the other teams were upset, thinking, well, why would those 4 go in? Why wouldn't Jacksonville have a chance to come in? And of course, Donald Trump he wanted the Generals to come in and be a third team in New York, but the Giants and the Jets hated that. So, but that's my prediction of what would have a hypothesis, if that's the right word, of what would have happened.
So so in 86 is when the team disbanded and the league disbanded, correct?
Correct.
And
I hate
so
that word anyway, by the way.
what now?
Disbanded. I hate that word.
Oh, disbanded. Okay.
Well, we had to disband, but because there weren't enough teams. We were ready to go in Memphis. We
Sure.
were ready to play. We had the team players under contract and ready to go. Had a coaching staff and we're ready to go. Unfortunately, that was a real tough day down here in Memphis.
So what did you decide to do after that? Here, the reason you came down here is no longer. So what did you decide that you wanted to do? I mean, we know what you did do now, but what was that thought in your head about what do you do next?
Well, we thought we were going to win. We thought we were going to win the appeal. That's the only
Right.
reason we delayed playing in our minds because of the crazy verdict that came out.
Right.
All the lawyers were sure you're going to win on appeal. And so we kept the team and the coaches together going through that 80. So our immediate action plan was to stay ready to go. And we kept most of our play. Now, Reggie, we did negotiate with the Eagles and, did release Reggie. He was too great a player to sit out for
Yeah.
a year. But we had players, coaches, leases. We had everything ready to go. So that was the immediate work there. And then, um, so that was in the late 80s. And then thereafter, you know, that would have been like, I think it was 87 or 88 when uh, some headhunters came to me and wanted me to be commissioner of the World Basketball League, which was a new startup league
Right.
that was basically, we had a lot of overseas activities and some good players in that. So I served as a commissioner for 4 years, but we had the league office here in Memphis since I was here. And, we had a good staff of people that were ready to switch into, since you're a basketball person, we had a couple of, players. Let's see, a little point guard from Memphis was playing for us. Askew played with us.
Hmm.
We had uh, we had some good players. John Starks, who later became a Hall
Right.
of Famer for the Knicks, played there, and so I did that for 4 years. And then the governor of Colorado had asked me to put together the expansion effort to get a Major League Baseball team for Colorado. That's where I'm from.
Right.
So
Right.
I was kind of commuting back and forth between Memphis and Denver, putting that together. 'Cause sports law was sort of my bag, and
Sure.
working with sports contracts and that kind of thing. So I did that for a few years. Put together the team. Was president of the Colorado Rockies sort of early days, and then I'd always promised Billy Dunavant and Fred Smith and the group here we'd try like hell to get the NFL team. So sold my stock in the Rockies, and then we tried to get the NFL when they did the expansion deal.
Mhm.
What was it, 92 or 93?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Jacksonville and Charlotte built new stadiums from the ground
Right.
up. Memphis didn't have the, I guess, political juice or whatever it's called to build
Right.
a new stadium. I'm convinced that we built a new stadium, we would have got the team. They wouldn't have put two teams on the East Coast.
Sure.
They wanted the second team to be in the Central Time Zone, but that's another story. And then there were five finalists for the two expansion spots, and St. Louis was a finalist. They got the Rams to move because they had built that new dome stadium there.
Right.
Um, Baltimore ended up getting the original Cleveland Browns to move, so they got
Right.
the team there. And then Nashville figured out all we have to do is build a new stadium, and so they used all our demographic information, moved it over 200 miles to Nashville. Phil Bredesen, well, I give him a lot of credit. He was the mayor of Nashville. He figured out, hey, if we
Right.
build a new stadium, we can get an NFL team too, because there was that opening there, as I said, with the movement in the league.
Sure.
There's still the money wasn't out of control at that time. So they built a new stadium. So they got what we thought should have been our Memphis.
I do remember that. I absolutely
And
remember that.
we're still mad at Nashville for
I
now. I
am too.
respect them for what they achieved there because, again, sometimes in Memphis, we need to have the political leadership. It's a lesson here. You got to
Right.
look forward. You got to look out into the future and be thinking forward rather than always, waiting. That's another time on your podcast, Sandy.
So, what made you take the job as executive director of the Liberty Bowl?
Well, we had just came in third, as I say, to Jacksonville and Charlotte, and football had given me a lot to my life. Got me, to college and to law school and coaching
Right.
at the University of Colorado, and it had been great to me, and I loved the game. And so after we didn't get the NFL team, the group, the Liberty Bowl Association, a nonprofit association, asked us to step in and
Right.
manage the bowl. So I've been doing that. Well, it's 32 years, I think. But in the
Yeah.
meantime, we tried to have the XFL, and NBC said, let's
Hmm.
try and do that. We tried to do that, but again, they were short-sighted what they did. And then the Canadian League, we tried to do that when
Right.
CBS was open there, but that didn't work either. So, I've enjoyed the time, the camaraderie with the college coaches and the players, and it's bowl games are a great experience for the
Sure.
great number of players. So sometimes, especially the media, they get too fixated on the two or three hotshot players. They're getting the big
Right.
money anyway. And like this last year, we had a Navy team come in here, and all those young guys that now two of them just got drafted.
Hmm.
It's unusual for. but their star quarterback, he said, "No, I'm going to turn down. I'm going to go to flight school and be hot. What do they call it? Hot. What do they call the Tom Cruise kind of flyers? The
Oh, the hot
Top
shot
Gun,
pilot. Yeah.
Top Gun
Top Gun.
flyers.
Yeah, Top Gun.
But so and they had it's a great experience and it's an opportunity for the entire college community to get together, the families to be with their players. It's a great experience. So yeah, I've enjoyed the time here with the AutoZone Liberty Bowl.
So I guess my question then to kind of end this is you came down here for Billy Dunavant when he took you fishing and he talked you into staying and something just kept you here. Like what was it that just kept you
You,
calling Memphis home?
Sandy, I think you hit it right on the head. Billy Dunaway is the man. I mean, I would do anything for run through a wall for him. He was a great leader and a great inspiration, and you know he took his word was his bond, and
Right.
and so still together with the Dunavant family in that sense, and my sons had great educations, and so a lot of time people ask me, I mean, you could live in Denver or you could live where you want. I said, no, the Memphis people really great. We have our problems, like I say, sometimes we don't look out in the future and think long
Right.
term. Think
Right.
That's my thing. We got to think long term, and so we've enjoyed it very much being here, and as long I can do the things and have the camaraderie with the folks in the college football world, and so yeah, so and the people in Memphis, and growing up and how you're doing your podcast here, that there's some really good people. It's not really the deep South, but I would say the mid
Sure.
South. And when I came down from New York, I was kind of up in New York. How if you shake hands on a deal, then how fast could the lawyers turn the turns around a little bit or renegotiate
Right.
stuff here? But Billy Dunn taught me. I mean, your word is your bond, and you follow through and do what you say you're going to do, and so that's always impressed me about Memphis. Not that, and I still love. I got one son that lives in Denver and one that's here. So, but there's a lot of great places. But we've really enjoyed it here and love the relationships here in Memphis.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for joining me today. I so appreciate your time, and I hope to get to meet you in person and we can share some more stories. I'd
I'm
love to hear all that.
glad to hear that. I will get you into football a little bit. In addition to basketball, I had a life in basketball. And I learned an awful lot about that, especially being over in Russia and all those European players. When I was commissioner of the World Best, there were I think I'm not sure there were even one because one of the Lithuanian players came over to the NBA. But talking with David Stern, I said these players over in Europe and Asia,
Yeah.
they're fundamentally sound. They're going to be coming into your league, David. And so I knew just enough to be dangerous in basketball. Penetrate and kick it back out for a 3-point shooter. That's what's going on now, and that was what those Europeans and
Yeah.
Russians were doing in that day.
And there you have it. That wraps up today's show. Steve, thank you again for being my guest today and for sharing your stories, your leadership journey, and such an important chapter of Memphis sports history. And if you out there enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to check out Dr. Keith B. Wood's latest book, The Memphis Showboats, the USFL Team, and the City's Fight for Major League Status. You can purchase it at Amazon or directly through Keith's website at keithbwood.com. Thank you all for watching and listening, especially if you've made it all the way to this end of the show. I truly appreciate your support. And another reminder to subscribe to the show wherever you listen or watch. My mantra is like, share, and review. Follow us on social media at 5THQRT Podcast. Until next time, remember, change is our ally and it paves the way for greatness. Stay inspired. Have a great rest of the week.